Hey guys, it's Nicole, and this is the third layout for April 2013 Super Savers portion of the Super Sketch Club kit from Scrapbook Generation. And I would say out of the three, this one was probably my favorite. I don't know if it was just the mix of the patterns or the fact that it was more of a, wallpaper left to right sort of. You can see the pattern papers all over the paper, and that's kind of what I like. I did change up my photos a little bit. The sketch called for a horizontal 6x4 photo on the left. You can see it in the sketch right there. It had 4 portrait 4x6s and a landscape. When I was going through my photos, I really wanted to keep the photos of my husband and my son together on one layout. And there wasn't any that were already printed in a landscape, and I had 5 that I wanted to use. And I really didn't want to start cutting out some of the background because the place that we had our family pictures done was gorgeous. Like, I didn't want any of the pretty trees in the background being cropped out too much. I loved some of the images that our photographer had done where it was pulled back and you can see them walking through the park together. And it was one of those things where at the time she was actually taking pictures of myself and my daughter, and they had kind of walked off to give us some space and kind of keep the kids apart for a few minutes. And as soon as I saw them walking, we kind of both looked at each other, and she, walked over to go take a couple pictures of them. And I love her for that, and I love those photos that she sent back to us. So I kind of had to rework how I was going to do the photos, and it wasn't anything crazy. I just knew, okay, I have 5 photos, they're all portrait, and I want them basically to just go in a line across the page. So what I did was I kind of just looked through the photos and determined which ones I was going to be able to crop down, and that I will be doing here in a minute. At this point, I'm just inking the edges of all these big papers. I trimmed down the ones that go across the gap between the 2 pages, and I'm just attaching everything down to the background page so that I can kind of lay out my photos and figure out how I was going to rework those. And so I'm just attaching that last little piece, and then here you can see the 5 photos that I have to work with, and there was really only 2 that I felt I could kind of trim off some of the background. So I knew that those 2 were going to have to stay together, and I didn't measure anything. I literally just kind of looked at it and said, okay, I'm going to crop out this much, this feels okay, and then I could just kind of eyeball it, and if I needed more I could go and trim more. But it ended up being that the first trim was fine. So I'm going to ink the edges of these photos as well. I did it in layout number 2 when I noticed that my photos were kind of just lacking a little something when they were on that white cardstock, and then again on some of the pattern papers. So I'm just inking the edges of those in the same brown ink I used on the paper, and it's a brown distress ink. I want to say it's Vintage Photo. I think that's the only brown one I have. And I'm just going to go ahead and put my photos down. I'm just leaving a little bit of a gap between the photos. And the left page was easier to line up my photos just because of the plaid paper kind of came in handy that I could line them up along the pattern there. And it doesn't bother me that those photos are, not standard sizes or anything like that anymore. I really, like the middle one, I really wanted to still be able to see that the camera was pulled back and that you could see the big trees and the path in the park, and I didn't want to get too crazy cropping the photos. And here I am just putting the last little bit of the chipboard pieces that were left over from that bag of chips. I had not found my glue dots, still looking for those, so I just ended up putting a couple layers of ATG on the back of the chipboard and sticking them down, and they haven't popped off or anything. I hung them up on the wall to take pictures, and they've been moved around a couple times in my scrapbook room, and they have not popped off. So I think I got a good roll of ATG this time. And this little yellow one I was kind of fiddling around with, mostly because I had a couple pieces of the chipboard where the printed colored pieces had either gotten rubbed off or they'd gotten stuck to something else, and it was just raw chipboard showing. So any of the pieces like that were kind of damaged, I tried to cover up, or I just took my scissors and kind of cut that piece off and tucked it underneath something so that it wasn't noticeable that I had sort of altered it. And then it was after I got all the chipboard pieces on that I realized I had forgotten to add this little strip of paper from the bottom of one of the pattern papers. So I grabbed that. When I had inked it, notched the end of it, I'm going to go ahead and add that to the layout as well. And it's got open space on it to where later if I want to write a little journaling on it or do some stamping, I can go back and do that. And then for this one, I just grabbed some gold sequins from Pretty Pink Posh and some tiny glue dots and just kind of scattered them around here and there. I wanted to add a little bit something, and I didn't want it to sort of distract from the pictures, so I just went with one color and just a couple here and there. And there you can see that yellow flower is one of the ones that the color had gotten rubbed off on. And that was pretty much it as far as anything else that I added to the layout. And here is a couple pictures of some of the chipboard and the sequins together. And some of the inking on the photos you can see a little better in this picture, and then just another picture of the whole layout together. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will catch you on the next one. Bye!